It's kind of like, you know that saying, you don't know what you've got till it's gone? Host, speaker. Well, I feel like we rarely think about our hearts, those kind of like tireless drummers in our chests until there's a problem.
Yeah, that's so true. Heart health, it's often something people kind of just take for granted.
Totally. And that's exactly why I'm thrilled we're doing this deep dive today. We're going to really try to understand and manage heart health. And we've got some seriously great info from the Heart Foundation for this one. They're a gold mine of, evidence-based info. But before we even start, just a quick reminder, this is for, informational purposes only, not a replacement for a doctor's advice.
Absolutely. Think of this as like a crash course in, understanding your heart, but always chat with your doctor or your healthcare provider for any personalized advice.
Perfect. So let's unpack this thing. First stop on this deep dive. We got to understand the risk factors when it comes to heart disease, right? And the Heart Foundation, they're pretty clear there isn't just one single cause. It's this whole like complex mix of different things.
Right. And the first thing to really get is that these risk factors, they kind of fall into two buckets, modifiable and the non-modifiable. So modifiable, those are the ones within our control. We can change those. And then non-modifiable, well, those are the things we inherit, our biology.
Okay, so that makes sense. So something like, say, family history, that'd be a non-modifiable risk factor.
Exactly. So if your parents, maybe siblings, have a history of heart disease, your own risk, it climbs up. And sadly, you can't really like swap out your genes, right?
Yeah.
Same goes for age too. Older we get, the higher the risk generally.
In gender as well, right? I've always heard like men are statistically more at risk.
That's right. Although it's key to remember that heart disease, it's a leading cause of death for both men and women.
So it's definitely something everyone needs to be aware of, not just like later in life stuff. So, okay, if those non-modifiable factors, they're kind of out of our hands, what can we actually do? Like what actions can we take to protect our hearts?
That's where the modifiable factors really come in. These are the areas, where we can make real changes with a big impact on our heart health.
Okay, so let's dive into those. Give me the rundown. What are the biggies we got to be mindful of?
Well, get this. The Heart Foundation points out that more than half of Australian adults, they have 3 or more risk factors for heart disease.
Wow, okay, that's a pretty sobering statistic when you hear it like that. It makes you realize how common these risk factors actually are.
It does. And it highlights why being proactive about heart health is so important. So within those modifiable factors, we've got lifestyle choices. We're talking smoking, what you eat, how active you are, how much you drink, and then there are pre-existing conditions, things like high blood pressure, your cholesterol, and diabetes.
Okay, so a mix of things we can directly control, our daily choices, and then things that, well, they often need a doctor's help to manage.
Exactly.
Let's start with those lifestyle factors. Smoking, we all know it's a no-no for, well, everything health-wise, but how bad is it really for our hearts specifically?
Okay, think of it this way. Smoking, it doubles, and in some cases, increases your risk of dying from a heart attack by up to 5 times.
5 times? That's huge.
It is. And it's not just heart attacks either. Smoking, it significantly ups your risk for stroke, peripheral artery disease, we can talk about that another time, and sudden cardiac arrest.
Wow, okay, I knew it was bad, but that really puts it in perspective. Yeah. So quitting smoking, that's got to be top of the list for a healthy heart then.
Absolutely. The Heart Foundation's crystal clear on that one, quitting. It's the single most important thing you can do for your heart.
Okay, so cigarettes, down the drain. What about diet? We hear a lot about, heart-healthy eating, but what's that actually look like day to day? It's got to be more than just cutting out sugar, right? You're right, it's way more nuanced than that. It's about this sustainable eating pattern, something that nourishes your heart for the long haul. That means focusing on foods that, they lower that bad cholesterol, help manage blood pressure, and they give you the good nutrients.
Okay, so less about deprivation, more about consistently making smarter choices. Give us the highlights. What should we be piling on our plates?
Think like vibrant fruits and veggies, right? Fiber-rich whole grains, your oats, brown rice. Lean proteins are key fish, beans, lentils, and then healthy fats from nuts, seeds, avocados. Those are your friends. These are all packed with antioxidants, fiber, good fats. They all support a healthy heart.
Sounds pretty tasty, actually. So it's less about a rigid diet, more about incorporating those heart-healthy foods regularly.
Exactly. Small, sustainable changes. That's the key.
All right, so we've tackled smoking, we've talked diet. What about exercise? We all know, or we should, that moving our bodies is good. But how big of an impact are we talking for our hearts?
Huge. Huge impact. See, when we're inactive, our heart muscles, they weaken. And our blood vessels, they lose their elasticity, that ability to, expand and contract. Think of it like anything else you don't use regularly doesn't work as well, right?
So we're talking more than just a casual stroll in the park then.
Right. Aim for at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity each week. Or you can do 75 minutes of vigorous intensity aerobic activity spread throughout the week.
What's the difference between moderate and vigorous exactly?
Okay, so moderate intensity, that gets your heart rate up for sure, but you can still hold a conversation. Think brisk walking, cycling, maybe some dancing. Vigorous, that means you're breathing hard, can only squeeze a few words out between breaths. That's your running, swimming laps, hiking uphill, that kind of thing.
Gotcha. So finding activities we enjoy and that we can stick with, that's key.
Exactly. Make movement part of your life, not a chore. And here's a bit of a shocking stat from the Heart Foundation. 80%, a whopping 80% of Australian adults just aren't active enough.
80%. So that's what most of us then. So simply by being more active than average, we're already ahead of the game. That's motivating.
It is. Small changes, big differences.
Okay, so we've hit smoking, diet, exercise. Now wait, it's a sensitive topic, I get it, but we can't ignore it when we're talking heart health.
Absolutely not. Carrying extra weight, especially around the middle, it puts strain on your heart. Increases your risk of developing heart disease, plain and simple.
So how do we know if our weight's in a healthy range?
Body mass index, or BMI. It's a decent starting point. It's not perfect, but it's a measure of body fat based on, your height and weight. You can find BMI calculators online. Check yours. But again, always best to chat with your doctor about your own personal health goals.
Gotcha. What about alcohol? There's always so much back and forth. Is moderate drinking good? Is it bad? What's the deal there?
Here's the thing. Excessive alcohol, no question, is harmful to heart health. You can raise your blood pressure, weaken the heart muscle, and up the risk of stroke.
So moderation, as with most things, I guess.
Exactly. If you choose to drink, moderation is key. That means no more than 1 standard drink a day for women and 2 for men, max.
Good to know. So far, we've tackled those lifestyle factors that impact heart health, but you mentioned pre-existing conditions too. Let's shift gears and talk about those. What are some of the common conditions that can, impact our hearts?
Yeah, let's talk about those pre-existing conditions. So the big 3, the ones you always hear about with heart health, they're high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and then there's diabetes.
Okay, so these are the ones that more often than not need a doctor to help manage, right?
Yeah, often, but not always. Sometimes just changing up your lifestyle, that can make a real difference, especially if you catch it early. But let's break each one down, starting with high blood pressure, or what's also called hypertension. Imagine your arteries. Think of them like highways. And your blood, that's the traffic flowing through. Now, high blood pressure, that's like having non-stop rush hour traffic. Way too much force pushing against the walls of your arteries.
And just like how rush hour, it can wear down those highways, high blood pressure is doing the same to our arteries.
Exactly. Over time, that constant pressure, it damages the artery walls, makes them more prone to plaque buildup, which then narrows everything, restricts the blood flow. And we know restricted blood flow, that's a recipe for heart attacks and strokes.
It's wild how something you don't always feel can be doing that kind of damage.
It really is. That's why those checkups, they're so important. High blood pressure, it's often called the silent killer because it doesn't always have obvious symptoms.
No, okay, that's a good reminder for me. I'm going to schedule that checkup I've been putting off. So high blood pressure, for sure, something to take seriously. What about high cholesterol? We hear good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, but honestly, I'm not always sure I get the difference.
Yeah, it can be confusing. But getting cholesterol, it's essential for heart health. So cholesterol itself isn't bad inherently. It's a fatty, waxy substance that our bodies actually need to function properly.
So then what's the issue? Why does it get such a bad rap?
It's all about balance, right? Our bodies need it, but they can also make their own cholesterol. Is when you get too much of the bad kind, that's the LDL cholesterol, that's when problems start brewing. Okay, so picture this. HDL cholesterol, the good guy. It's like a garbage truck going around, picking up the excess LDL, the bad cholesterol from your arteries, taking it to the liver to be disposed of.
So HDL cholesterol, our internal cleanup crew. I like that.
Right. And it shows why having more HDL cholesterol is generally good for your heart. Now, when you've got too much LDL hanging around, it's like the garbage is piling up faster than the torque can remove it. Sticks to the artery walls, forms plaque, and eventually, boom, those passageways are narrowed, just like we were talking about with high blood pressure.
So both high blood pressure and high LDL cholesterol, they both end up doing that same damage, restricting blood flow.
Bingo. They're like the major players when it comes to heart disease. Now, the third condition, remember we mentioned diabetes, that plays a part in this whole thing too.
Right, diabetes. We usually think blood sugar levels with that. So how does it connect to heart health?
So diabetes, especially when it's not well managed, it means there's too much glucose, that's a type of sugar, just hanging out in your bloodstream.
Oh,
Over time, those high blood sugar levels, they can damage your blood vessels. And yeah, that includes the ones in your heart, makes them way more vulnerable to, you guessed it, more plaque buildup.
so it's like all three, high blood pressure, the high cholesterol, and then diabetes, they all just gang up on your heart.
You got it. And here's the thing, they often come as a package deal. If you have diabetes, higher chance of high blood pressure and high cholesterol, which, well, you can imagine, just compounds those risks.
That's kind of scary how connected it all is.
It is. But hey, knowledge is power, right? Understanding these links, it gives us the power to do something, to be proactive about our heart health. And the good news is, even if you have one or even all three of these conditions, managing them well, that can drastically reduce your risk of heart disease.
That is good news. So it's less about being scared, more about like taking charge. So let's shift gears a bit, talk about what we can actively do to manage these conditions. We covered lifestyle stuff earlier, but I'm guessing those become even more important when you're managing these pre-existing conditions.
You're absolutely right. Lifestyle changes, they're usually the first line of defense, and trust me, they can make a world of difference.
Let's break it down then. What are some of the most impactful changes we can actually make?
Well, we already touched on how important the heart-healthy diet is. Regular exercise, staying at a healthy weight, ditching the cigarettes, and keeping the alcohol in check. But yeah, these all become even more critical when you're managing those pre-existing conditions.
It's like taking those good habits up a notch.
Exactly. For example, think about your diet. You want to watch the sodium. Too much salt sends that blood pressure up. Reading labels, choosing the lower sodium stuff, that becomes key. And if you're dealing with high cholesterol, working in foods with lots of soluble fiber, things like oats, beans, lentils, that can actually help lower those LDL cholesterol levels.
So it's all about like being strategic with those choices, really targeting your specific health needs. What about exercise? Any types that are especially good for your heart?
Honestly, all exercise is good for your ticker. But aerobic exercise, the kind that really gets that heart rate up and keeps it there, that's especially good for your cardiovascular fitness. Think, brisk walking, going for a jog, swimming, hopping on a bike, that sort of thing.
What about strength training? Heard that's important, but how does that benefit our hearts?
Ah, good one. Strength training, so using weights, resistance bands, that kind of stuff, that's all about building and keeping that muscle mass. And get this muscle, it's more metabolically active than fat. Basically, it burns more calories even when you're resting, which, bonus, helps with weight management. Plus, strength training, it helps your body use insulin better, which is huge for managing blood sugar.
So it's not just cardio, we got to mix it up, aerobic and strength training for that overall heart health.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance that you enjoy, something you can actually stick with. Remember, consistency is key when it comes to these lifestyle changes.
Right. It's not about being perfect. It's about making those changes you can keep up. Now, we talked about those lifestyle changes being the first line of defense, but what if those aren't enough?
That's when medication often comes into play. And the good news is there are lots of really effective medications out there that can help manage high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and of course, diabetes.
Let's get into those a bit. What are some of the common ones used for each?
Okay, so for high blood pressure, you've got a few different kinds of medications. Diuretics, ACE inhibitors, ARBs, and calcium channel blockers. They each work a bit differently, but the goal's the same. Lower that blood pressure, reduce the strain on your heart.
And for cholesterol?
Statins. Those are the go-to for lowering cholesterol. What they do is block a substance your liver needs to make cholesterol, which means lower LDL, that bad cholesterol, in your blood.
We talked about statins earlier, but it's worth repeating. They're really effective at lowering the risk of those serious things, heart attacks, strokes.
For sure. And for diabetes, the type of medication really depends on what type of diabetes you have. There are some that help your pancreas make more insulin, others help your body use insulin better, and even some that help your kidneys get rid of excess glucose.
It's really amazing how far we've come in being able to manage these conditions.
It really is.
Yeah.
But really important point here, medication. It works best hand in hand with those lifestyle changes. It's not one or the other. It's about using everything we've got to manage these conditions properly.
So it's a team effort, taking care of your heart from all angles.
You got it. And one last thing I really want to stress. Talk to your doctor. Be open and honest with them. They're the ones who can help you figure out your own personal risk factors, see where your health's at right now, and come up with a plan just for you to manage these conditions.
Solid advice. It's like a partnership, working together to keep your heart healthy. Speaking of heart health, in the last segment, we started talking about some, well, kind of immediate concerns like angina, which honestly sounds a bit scary. Let's unpack that a bit more. What exactly is angina and what causes it? So, angina, it sounds kind of, I don't know, a little bit dramatic, like something out of a medical drama. What's actually going on in our bodies when we're experiencing angina?
Yeah, I get it. The word itself, it can sound a little scary. But remember, angina, it's not a disease in itself. It's a signal. Like your body's trying to tell you something's up. Like imagine that check engine light popping up on your dashboard.
Okay, so probably not something you want to just ignore then. But what's making that warning light flash in the first place? What's happening with the heart?
Basically, angina is chest pain. Or sometimes it's more like discomfort. That happens when your heart muscle, it's not getting enough blood, and that blood needs to be rich in oxygen. Remember we were talking about plaque buildup in the arteries?
Right, like with the high cholesterol and high blood pressure we were discussing.
Exactly. So when those arteries, the ones supplying blood to the heart itself, they get all narrowed or blocked, well, it's almost like trying to, I don't know, force a fire hose worth of blood through a tiny little straw. Makes the heart work harder, way harder. And that's when you might feel that pain, that angina.
So it's like the heart's trying to send a message, like,
Yeah.
hey, not getting enough oxygen here, something's off.
That's a great way to put it. And it's definitely a message you don't want to ignore.
So what does it actually feel like? Is it always that classic clutching your chest, Hollywood heart attack kind of thing?
Not always, no. It can be different for everyone, really. Some people, they feel tightness in their chest. Others, it's more of a squeezing or even just this heavy pressure. And here's the thing, it can also radiate, go to your arms, your jaw, neck, back, even your stomach sometimes, which can make it tricky to figure out what's going on.
Wow. Okay, that is surprising. So not always that dramatic, intense pain you might think. But regardless of what it feels like, if you think even for a second you might be having angina, what should you do?
First things first, stop whatever you're doing, just rest.
Okay, rest. Makes sense. Anything else?
If you're on any angina medication, something your doctor's given you, now's the time to take it, just as directed. But, and I mean this, don't mess around. Call for help if the pain is really bad, if it sticks around for more than a few minutes, or if it doesn't ease up with rest or that medication.
So, bottom line, when in doubt, always play it safe, call for help. Right.
Always. Better to be safe than sorry, especially when it comes to your heart.
How do doctors diagnose angina?
Well, they'll start by asking about your medical history. They'll want to listen to your heart and hear all about your symptoms. Then they might suggest some tests just to get a clearer picture. There's an electrocardiogram, or EKG, that measures your heart's electrical activity, and a stress test can show them how your heart handles exertion. And sometimes they might even do a more in-depth imaging test called an angiogram.
What's an angiogram exactly?
It's a type of x-ray, but a special one that lets doctors actually see the blood flow inside the arteries that go to your heart, the coronary arteries. What they do is they thread this very thin tube through a blood vessel, usually in your groin or your arm, all the way up to your heart. And then they inject a special dye that makes those arteries show up clearly on the x-ray.
Wow, that is incredibly precise. So once you've got a diagnosis, what are the treatment options for angina?
The treatment, it really depends. Depends on how severe the angina is and, what's causing it in the first place. For some people, those lifestyle changes, like quitting smoking, cleaning up the diet, moving more, and finding ways to, dial down the stress, that might be enough to manage those symptoms and keep future episodes at bay.
So those healthy habits, they're crucial even when you're already dealing with a heart condition.
Exactly. It's not just about prevention, it's about managing what's going on, too. For others, medication might be the way to go. There are meds that can help relax the blood vessels, lower blood pressure, get those cholesterol levels under control. All those things can really help improve the blood flow to the heart.
And sometimes surgery is an option too.
Yeah, in some cases, if those arteries are super blocked, there are procedures like an angioplasty or a bypass surgery. Those can help improve the blood flow. Angioplasty, they use this tiny balloon to open up the blocked artery. And bypass surgery, Well, that creates a whole new route for the blood to flow around the blockage.
That's incredible. There are so many options out there these days. It's reassuring to know that there are ways to address these issues and really improve heart health.
It really is. And it just goes to show how important it is to stay informed, be proactive. Your heart will thank you.
Well, this has been a deep dive and a half. We've covered so much, from understanding those heart disease risks to the ins and outs of cholesterol to recognizing and managing angina. It's a lot to take in. But one thing's for sure, when it comes to your heart, knowledge is power.
Couldn't agree more.
And hey, this is just the start. Head over to the Heart Foundation's website. They've got a ton of great resources there, from healthy recipes and exercise tips to, in-depth info about heart conditions and how to manage them.
It's a fantastic resource, really is, for anyone who wants to take charge of their heart health.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What's one small change you can make today, right now, to be kind to your heart? Maybe it's squeezing in a 20-minute walk, swapping that sugary drink for water, or just taking a beat to chill out, do some deep breathing. Every little thing makes a difference.
Absolutely. Remember, when it comes to heart health, small steps can lead to some seriously big changes.
That's it for our deep dive into heart health. Thanks for listening, everyone.